Welcome to the Silicon Slopes Conversations. We're here with David Wright, who's the co-founder and CEO of Pattern. How are you?
Good, thanks.
It's been about 3 years since you were here last. A lot's happened.
Yeah.
And I have a hunch that you saw some really interesting data points over the last 3 years. But before we get into that, let's set the table for those that don't know. What is Pattern? What do you guys do? What is your business model?
Yeah, essentially, we help brands sell more product, I guess, at the end of the day, globally. So we have 20 offices globally. We have about 1,200 employees. And if you're a brand or you own a product, my background is 17 years of data science, all tech. And so we've taken, all the signals you can get in the digital space globally and said, how can we use a formula, which essentially traffic times conversion times price, product availability repeated for lifetime customer value equals revenue for a brand. So we'll do all that math on that side, and the ending result is brands growing like crazy. So, some of the brands we've worked with have gone from, 12 million to 110 million, 19 million, 180 million, 3 million to 40 million. So all digital.
And so that would result in a lot of really good Christmas cards, I would imagine.
Yeah, I did have one guy who said I should have bought you a car, but he bought me dinner instead.
At least he gave you something. That's great. All right, so these could be any type of brand, quality over like tchotchke stuff, but it could be anything that people need to sell and buy.
That's right. Yeah. Mathematically, if we have a patent around a concept called destiny, and it's if your product is already good. So say you have a product that's well received by customers and it's well rated and so forth. Then mathematically, we calculate destiny across, say, keywords or keyword phrases or any, your destiny is much bigger to win if the product is good. If it's not so good, then, I got a company come to visit the office, and they're like, hey, would you guys like to take this on? I was like, not really, because your product isn't that good. And so if you can combine what we do with an actual good product, then the sky's the limit. But we don't claim to be able to take a product that doesn't really deserve to be great and make it great. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be a little bit too much to ask, but the results are really defining, and the folks that have interacted with you and been customers that I know, just anecdotally, really good results. And obviously it's working with revenue, which you're not shy to discuss. Last time you dropped a pretty big number, and you've, in publications, mentioned bigger numbers and that these goals are achievable. How's that gone over the last year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah, good. You always, I think every CEO, founder, executive, leader in any company always wishes their numbers were bigger and better. We're the same way, but we'll clear $1 billion. We'll handily clear $1 billion in revenue this year, which is great. And but I think people look at Pattern like, wow, it's a big company, $1 billion in revenue. But I don't think people really realize we're just getting started on the machine. We normally run, you guys probably all have like stage 2 pipeline where, you go through it, your BDRs do reach out and you have some stage 1 and then it gets further qualified. We move it into stage 2. Our stage 2 pipeline usually runs around 200 or 300 million in new business that, we close about 24% of that. Well, about is pretty much exactly that. But right now our stage 2 pipeline is 1.4 billion. And it will just get bigger and bigger because it's such a global, if you think from a brand's perspective, how can, and we charge a very small amount. So we only take a 3 or 4% margin, which our investors don't like that much, but the brands love it. And it's a $7 trillion market and growing every day because brick and mortar continues to shrink a little bit and e-com continues to go up. So with those tailwinds and a $7 trillion piece of the pie to tackle, Even our sales guys are like, well, I can't believe a pipeline that's bigger than most companies, but it's still really small. I think people will be surprised at how big like a Pattern will be, and we won't be the only ones. There will be many other competitors in our space.
Yeah, and that's daunting. Maybe not for you, but most people that would be intimidating. You've got a lot of growth in revenue, employees. There's the board to deal with. That requires a pretty good culture and thinking through how to do all of that. When did you start to tackle that problem? How much time do you dedicate to it? And how do you incorporate the whole team to build a culture like that?
Oh gosh, it's one of the things that over the years has bothered me, because how it's often said that a company should only focus on one or two things, and we get accused on occasion of hey, if you guys do this in the U.S., figuring it out in China is going to be too much, or figuring it out maybe over here, or maybe adding on the influencer marketing and tackling but it's still digital, it's still formulaic, and I've always been under the impression that some of the limitations we put on ourselves is simply because CEOs and managers, a lot of us, we all tend to do this. We overmanage. So if you hire great people, say top 15% people, that's what we think about it, and then you overmanage them, they just leave and they're frustrated, and they're more capable probably than you are anyway on what they do. And so part of the way we've been able to do it, and why it's not that daunting, is we just have great people that cover the different areas, and I don't have to do it. And if you look at some of our Glassdoor and just talk to people at Pattern, they love the freedom that they get, but it's almost weird that they would assume they wouldn't get freedom for me to even think about that, because you can never build a truly great company if you're trying to manage all of the little bits and pieces of it. So as long as we keep, matter of fact, that's the one thing that when I talk about if anyone ever says, hey, what's the risk of you guys not being great? And it's easy. It's just because we know the business model works. We're already hitting $1 billion. We have a 98, 99% retention rate with our brands. They love what we do. We have patented tech. We're on the path with the technology. We know it's going to work. The thing that would blow us up is if somebody else hires a better team than us. Because no matter how much cool strategy, our whole strategy is laid out on our website, the entire thing. So the reason why other companies aren't beating us is quite simple. My team is better than the other guy's team. And business is such a team sport. Sometimes I feel weird even talking. You guys sometimes will ask the CEOs to talk about things. And sometimes, do leadership training. I'm I don't know. I sort of feel like I'm right in with the team on all this stuff. And I didn't really do it. Sometimes they're like, hey, how did you build this? And I'm like, well, there's 1,200 people, and I work hard, but even if I worked around the clock, that equals maybe 3. And that's if I never slept. Right, you start it. If people are really engaged, they just jump in there. Amazing things happen. Just the business team sport concept.
Yeah, and you're going to hit on that a little bit more at Slope Summit with Todd Peterson and Johnny Hanna. Topic is going to be authentic culture, which is different than unauthentic and maybe just it's on the wall type of thing.
Yeah. It's probably one of my biggest, this might be revealing too much because everyone knows where I work. I worked for the church before coming here. And I got for many years, I wanted this one job that was a customer facing portfolio. They call them a portfolio. And they kept giving me coaching that my executive presence wasn't good enough. So, of course, I'm reading books on it and all this kind of stuff, right? And I'm trying to figure out how to have better executive presence. And whatever I figured out wasn't enough because I never got the job. And I found myself trying to be something that I wasn't really that good at anyway, right? Because I'm more like, I don't know, I just say it, and I don't know. I don't know how it comes across or whatever, but I'm not really trying to like, I'm not good at, and then I started thinking, I'm not sure if people are good at that. Because in initial days of Pattern, I used to go out with one of our sales guys, Steve Ellis, and he worked at Oracle as one of their top sales guys, and he has this sort of way about him, and I found myself doing the same thing again. I'm like trying to mimic Steve and trying to be smooth and all this, and then I'm like, wait, I suck at that. But I sell in my own sort of way, and Steve sold in his way, and if I try to be like Steve, I'll never really be a great, because what am I going to do? Like, the best I can be is like a second best version of Steve or something, right? And so I think you really have to embrace just being yourself. And so at Pattern, we're a bit psycho. One of the gals on our advertising team, she posted this thing on LinkedIn about executive presence. She was taking some class, so of course I lose my mind. I call her into my office. I'm like, tell me about this. What are you trying to do here at Pattern? Is there something we're doing that's making you think that you need to be better at executive presence, right? And she's like, well, people tell me I'm too aggressive. And I'm like, okay. Do some people like how aggressive you are? And she's like, of course. And I'm like, okay, so some people like how aggressive you are and some people don't like it. So what are you going to do? She's like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, maybe just be yourself. I'm like, don't think about it. She's like, because she was already great, right? And so that authenticity thing, I think, becomes, of course, then I walk out of the elevator and it says like something like how to dress, your best for, and I go crazy when it's like, hey, when you focus too much about like how you word something or how you might say something, I think we walk into a meeting, like if you were walking into an executive meeting, you're nervous anyway, and if you're trying to figure out like, okay, I know this guy wants me to say it like this or whatever, then I think people they lose like themselves a little bit. For one, they're not happy. For two, I just don't think they're as good. And so at Pattern, we're sort of, we die on this idea that, we just want people to be themselves, even if it's a little bit weird sometimes. And we sort of like it. Somebody's goofy, we're like, great, but I think the authentic culture is really important for one, people to be happy. Because I wasn't really happy when I was trying to be somebody else. I know that now. It took me a long time to realize it. And then I think they don't perform as well. I didn't perform as well, and I didn't really even believe in myself that much, right? And if you switch that, I think you don't know where your sort of limits are.
Yeah. I like that. And, asking that employee, like, do half the people like your style and the other? You go the path of least resistance and just be yourself, it usually works a lot better. Very cool. All right, so going back to kind of the blocking and tackling of Pattern, there's a lot that goes into selling something. Let's say there is a good product, and that person with the product doesn't know anything about e-commerce, right? There's like SEO, there's influencers, there's tons of apps and all sorts of things like that. You guys streamline all of that and do all of that. Would you guys like buy all of the inventory of this product? What are the various models that you interact with these entrepreneurs? Yeah,
we do. We usually buy the product. We probably do, 12 or 15 million a year in just consulting. But the other billion, right, is buying product. So usually that's how we do it. And we're good at certain things. The things that we're good at is on the math and data science side. So we have some interesting patents. So conceptually, I'm not going to go into this too much because every time I do this, the sales team is like, Dave, do not go into this detail. But say you take like an Amazon, it's a very simple sort of, everyone gets it. Almost everything is found with a keyword or keyword phrase, right? And so you can do some really cool math on that to say to yourself, if you use natural language processing and take all of those keywords and use lemmatization, you get, so a lot of you are probably familiar with the natural language processing, fairly simple, fairly easy, and fairly standard. So you lemmatize those keywords, you break them down into their roots. You're essentially now aligned to all search engines, and the products now get it. Then you start running math to say, this product, say it's I was looking at an iodine, which is a really interesting one, the other day, because everyone's starting to search for iodine using like nuclear fallout, literally. So pills for nuclear fallout, so all these things. And most of the brands they don't even know that's happening yet, right? So you can quickly identify, okay, and because no one is an incumbent, say, on nuclear fallout yet, from a machine learning perspective, you could win it. And so we calculate the output or label, if you guys are familiar with machine learning, the label on the machine learning or output for us, we have, of course, all the inputs, is winnability. And so we take and figure out, using correlation, which are all of the brands that compete against this brand or this product, and what are the chances they could win nuclear fallout versus you. And a lot of it is like, is your price better? Is your rating better? All these things. We have similarity scores and so forth. And then we say to the brand, if you spend money on that thing, we believe you could win it. By winning, to say land in the top 4. So if you land in the top 4, then we've also calculated if you do win it, how much money would you get, right? So all of that is super fun, very mathematical. And brands are crushing it on just doing that. Where I get irritated is the non-math stuff. Because you'll get like guys who are funny, and they're like, and all of a sudden, what blows up the models almost every time is some influencer. So the Dollar Shave Club guy who did that video is like wonk wonk or whatever, and he sells like 75,000 subscribers in the weekend, and mathematically, you shouldn't be able to do that, but he does, and so. We've tried to tackle that. We're getting better at the influencer side of it, but we're still stuck on the math. We're like, okay, if we calculate all the micro-influencers, and this micro-influencer likes wine, and so we're still doing all the math, and we did try to do the funny thing. So I called up all of the, this is maybe too much, but I called a bunch of all the comedy clubs around, and I had them all come to Pattern, and I was like, in waves, so like every hour or whatever, and I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing? Is there any formula? And a lot of them like have these funny formula. They have a formula, because if you go to watch them on stage, they like have this process they go through in their mind of like how they make jokes and stuff. And we tried that. It didn't work. But it's still a fascinating, because a micro-influencer is the same thing. Because you can know more about a micro-influencer than even say a keyword, which of course better informs any machine learning models. And so allowing brands to say pick a micro-influencer. So where we're really good is anything in the digital space that's very math related. If you're like, people don't usually come to Pattern and be like, hey, could you create us like this cool, funny video? We're like, no, I don't know why, we're terrible at it. So there's some things over there we're good at, and some things we're working on.
Yeah. All right, so if somebody's in the iodine business.
In the what?
Iodine business.
Yeah, iodine business.
You could, and they've got, 10,000 units sitting in their little warehouse. You could theoretically, if you're bullish on iodine, just buy all of that, run through the Pattern process, and be a winner in the top 4.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, for any given product, there's always, 2,000 or 3,000 keywords or keyword phrases you could go win. So then you got to decide, like, which one could you win for the least amount of money? And then once you win it, I hate advertising. I've gone through 3 or 4 advertising people, because advertising people, no offense if there's any advertising people out there, but they have this idea that it's all about storytelling. And they use these words like the halo effect. Like if you put like the billboard up, then somehow you should sell more. And I'm like, but I go back to the math thing. I'm like, but I can't measure that. And so that should be someone else's job, because those things always bug me. And then we get grumpy about it, and then I want to switch to a new advertising person, all those things, right? So But I think there are very measurable ways, and you can crush it. So if you had 10,000 units of iodine, but we're not really good at just selling through product because it's more of a lasting thing. So if you have a brand, we can get you rated in the top 4 on like probiotic or probiotic for women, or if you can't win that, probiotic for women over 50, or like you pick your niche and you go win that, and then you can own it for a long time. And it's hard for someone to dethrone you. So we're better at partnering with a brand that's like wants to be there for 3 or 5 years than like, hey, I just have 10,000 of these, I want to just sell.
Yeah, to like rednecks and preppers and stuff, but I get it. Very fascinating. And I don't think you're one that likes to be pitched on dreams in the sky and all of that. You like stuff that can be measured and math. Yeah. Very cool. All right, as you guys have grown and raised money and grown revenue, all of that, you've had a few acquisitions. How do you guys go about targeting those acquisitions? What's the process like, and what team members are involved?
Yeah, we have an integration M&A team, and it's all the formula. So we literally lay out the formula of like revenue equals traffic times conversion times price, repeat it, loyalty. So we lay that whole formula out. We're like, okay, here's the things that we're good at. So we're just about ready to announce another acquisition coming up here that's in the influencer space. And of course, that's all around the traffic, right? So we look at traffic. We just barely acquired Amplify, which is in the content management space, which would help us with conversion because it's getting content out there faster and cheaper. So whenever we're doing an acquisition strategy, it's all just starts with that overall formula, and then we identify areas where maybe we could move the needle here, and we don't have the data, or we're not good enough, or whatever, and then we find someone who's better than us at it.
Yeah. And how important are creatives in like selling something on Amazon at the end of the day, in your opinion?
Totally game changing. Yeah, it's one thing I disregarded in the beginning because I was like, oh, if we win mathematically, but just think about conversion. So say you land in the top 4 on this iodine, or probiotic for women or whatever, and they come to your page and you convert, say, 23%. You already paid all the money to get people there. Where you actually have to pay is in the traffic section of the equation. But once people land there, then you're just converting them. You can either convert them or not. Say you convert at 22% versus 37%, it's basically just printing free money for the brands. Because they don't have to pay any more to get that traffic there. They already did that. And if they can convert a few more of them, it's completely free. And algorithmically, any platform that sells rates conversion really high. So you don't only get the dollars that result in that conversion, but you also get a boost in most algorithms because they converted. So it's like it's almost as game-changing as anything you can do on that, And it's not just creative. It's like, hey, what actually works? So you need to get the creative types that like data, because some people are convinced they're just right, and they may be right, and they may not be right. And they need to be open to like the A/B testing that would help them. I was sitting with a brand and they were arguing about whether they should do this strategy or that to position the product, and we'd been working with them for quite a while. And so it seemed like the whole conversation sort of stopped, and then they're like, hey, Dave, what should we do? And I was like, I have no idea. But if you give me 3 months, then I'll tell you. I'll test both. Right, and so that's more so we have some really good creatives who are also open. They're like, okay, I thought this was the right way, but as it turns out, it's not. That is this other way. And user-generated content, which is just like, you can pay a ton for content, and then, how it is, you get some, like when you guys watch funny videos, I started watching with my daughter, like the Instagram Reels, right? They're funny. They cost like nothing. Like it's just somebody like laughing about throwing cheese on their cat's face or something, right? I laughed for like 10 minutes watching the cats all flip out about the cheese. And so user-generated content, sort of influencer, is massively powerful.
Yeah. This is all very interesting to me. So with your team, as you're building it out, obviously there's going to be a lot of engineers and data scientists. And in the early days, you got your start with fridge magnets, right? You and your co-founder, Melanie, who you happen to be married to. Do you want to actually just tell that story real quick?
Yeah, those of you who know Mal, she's the greatest person in my very biased opinion that has ever lived. But we started the company together in 2013. It was sort of our second run. We did some other business stuff before that, and it's funny at the time because I didn't want to tell her about the new business idea because I didn't want her to get more equity. It's weird. I didn't think we'd get married, of course. And so she's like, "Seems like you got this idea brewing." And I'm like, "I do," and I'm not going to tell you. And so a month or so after that, she's like, "Hey, have you finalized your thinking on this new idea?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think I'm ready to tell you." I always wanted to bring her in because she's just amazing. But so we had lunch at Cafe Rio. We decided everything. That's how, and from that little handshake across the burrito or whatever, that's how we've run the whole company ever since. And she, around, what was it? I think it was 3 years into the business, I asked her on a date. And I don't know if you guys know Mel, but she's gorgeous and smart and all this. And for data scientist types, many of you might know this, maybe high school weren't your best years. Right? So you don't have like your best moments through the dating times. And so most of the girls I liked, well, all of them, didn't like me back. And so I was thinking that might be the case when I asked her out, because I asked her to dinner, because we always went to lunch and stuff. That would have been fine. But I specifically was like, "Hey, you want to go to dinner?" And she's like, "Is this like a date?" I'm like, "I'd like it to be." I'd sort of planned that out, which is lame. But and she went, and then in 2018 we got married, and then, but lucky for me, she's super nerdy. I don't know if you guys have probably heard, maybe you guys heard us talk a little about this, but any of you guys play Civilization 6? Any video game? It's like a board game on the computer, crazy, nuts, complex. And this is embarrassing, but me and Mel together have dropped over 2,000 hours. I know you guys have your Steam accounts. If you've got wimpy 600 hours on a game, you're just like, that's child's play, right? But me and Mel on this game have dropped like 2,000 hours, and she has this little thing on her phone that's like some app that's like keeps track of our lifetime winning and losses. The only reason she keeps track of it is because she knows she's winning. And so we were playing last night, and she's like, "I'm upset because you're within 20 games of me." So I now know, as of last night, I'm 19 wins behind Mal in our lifetime winnings. But she's nutsland because we'll play. You cannot outlast her brain because the sun will be coming up. It's like we're up with our cabin. So one weekend a month we don't have kids. We have 10 combined kids together, and so our house is just complete madness. One weekend a month, all the kids go to like X's and whatever. And so we sneak up to the cabin, and we don't do anything else. We just as soon as we get there, we're like, poof, laptops open, and like microwave meals, and we just gaming our brains out. And like, last time we were there, it was like 5:30 in the morning. All of a sudden, the sun comes up, and I'm like, "Hey, we gotta go to bed. I'm dying over here." She's like, "One more game." And when she says that, it's like 8 hours. I'm like, "Are you?" I'm like, "I can't do it." But like, I challenge anyone to play Mel in Civ. Likely you will lose, and no way can you outlast a woman in front of that screen. Because she's going to the doctor. She's like, "Something's wrong with my eyes. I got dry eye or something." I'm like, "It's not dry eye. It's the computer."
That's a lot of Mountain Dew and conviction.
Yeah, I mean, how often do you find honestly, guys, doesn't that sound amazing? I mean, a smart, gorgeous computer girl who's a geek. It's great.
Yeah. It's great. And co-founder of the company and there for the whole journey. So the long question that I was getting to is like, you've got different personalities and different skill sets within Pattern, some of them being heavy math, formulaic, and data scientists. Are there ever any squabbles between like the creatives and the less analytical side versus those, and if so, who mediates those?
Not really, because I think that we're crazy about our hiring, so the bar for hiring is pretty high, and then it's just hard to argue with data. Like, and most people don't really try because the data people are usually like, oh, this is just the data, and they don't really get passionate about, like, have you met like a lot of these data guys? They aren't really like super emotional about one thing or another. And it's weird because probably the thing people say the most that we aren't even trying to do about pattern is that it's low ego. And I wonder if that's just because there's a bunch of data guys in there, or, but I don't know. It doesn't ever seem to be an issue. Mostly, everyone just usually wants to get to the right answer. But isn't that the way most every company, like most everyone just wants to get to the right answer? So as long as, it's when you start guessing that I think you get emotional. But when you're less guessing, then I think people don't argue anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so your guys' website, as we were talking before, has huge libraries of great content, all sorts of stuff that people can learn probably from scratch and become really well-versed in e-commerce. You guys are obviously very bullish in all of that, and you've given some data points. But over the last 2.5 years, what were you seeing, and was there anything surprising that bubbled up?
Yeah, I mean, the COVID bump was pretty awesome for e-commerce. So that was great for us. And then I thought it would be stronger after. So we projected our numbers last year we grew at 63% growth. We thought we'd grow 53 this year, and we'll revise that down to 42. So I thought it would be better. I thought we would beat it, actually. I sort of like put it out there thinking we'd actually beat it, and we're actually not even hitting it. So it slowed. Like, people went back to the stores a little bit faster than I thought. But overall, there's different pockets of places that are surprising, of course. Like in China, we have 200 people on the ground in China, and I think China has surprised me a little bit. The level of social selling is about 350 billion out of, say, the best estimate I think is about 3 billion. So at least 10% is all social platforms, where people are actually buying, like a WeChat or whatever, they're buying the good there. And I think that might translate some, but Facebook has its marketplace, but Facebook's marketplace is weird because it's more like furniture, and it's like KSL Classifieds or something. So I don't know if they'll really turn the needle so the social selling has been a little bit surprising in sort of both ways for me. I thought Facebook would do better than like a newspaper, sort of like the, buying used goods thing. And they haven't, So I think there's a lot of surprises in different areas.
I would imagine. And you guys, I also would imagine, can kind of see around corners and see the overall data with all of your clients and customers. We'll open it up for questions from the audience here in a second or two. You guys just did an event called Accelerate a couple of months ago at Grand America. Overall, why did you guys do that? Did you enjoy it? And what was the net result?
Yeah, well, we read, one of the things I love to do is I just like to read books because, we got some feedback one time from some investors that were like, hey, has your CRO ever been the CRO? I'm like, no. They're like, what about your chief people officer? I'm like, no. What about your CFO? No, but he was like the regional guy, NBC Universal. So they started going through like the executive team, and I'm like, okay, we've never done it before. They never brought me up, of course, but I know they're thinking about it. So I'm like, I know it's the elephant in the room is, of course, I've never done it either. And so maybe we don't know what we're doing, but we're good at reading books. So we're constantly reading books all the time. So I'll come into the leadership team, I'm like, hey guys, they're always like, oh no, another thing from a book. But there's a lot of good stuff there. about how companies run. And the one that we did Accelerate for is there's a book called Play Bigger. Have you guys read Play Bigger? You know, how to build your own category. Fascinating book. But so the concept there is that the book calls it the category king, which we hate just because we're, you know, we hate the idea of kings and men and all that stuff. And so we switched to sort of category leader. And but the category leaders pick up, like if you think of the big category leaders in the space, like Uber, and generally the book states, and I think it's pretty accurate, that 85% of all the winnings in a category go to the leader. And you have to, and they have this lightning strike event concept where like, so we essentially coined the phrase accelerator, because you know there's the aggregators in the space, and we built the word accelerator. And now, and you sort of have to have a lightning strike, this big event where you just go all in, you know, and if you watch like Qualtrics got the guys who wrote Play Bigger to come and consult with them on how to build the experience management category that they basically own, right? So same, like how do you build that category and then own it? So that's for us, that's why we called it Accelerate. Was more just, you know, trying to learn from, you know, some of the companies both around here. Like if you look at like a Qualtrics, you know, they freaking crushed that. It's brilliant, right? And there's many other companies that have done that same thing. So that was our attempt to do that. And it seems like, you know, now we're getting news articles. It always gets put in our Slack channels of like, hey, another company called themselves an accelerator. And we're like, cool. Yeah, it's sort of cool to build that, but or at least feel like we did.
Yeah. And overall, it was fun. Looked like really good guests, both from like media and entertainment, and then probably some data scientists and all of that. It looked like I was there. It was really fun and entertaining. Probably good to get it over with, though.
Oh yeah, it was really terrible. It's so much work. But what's really cool is, you know, like I went down the night before and it's all set up, and this is to my point. I didn't know it was going to look that good. And John LeBaron, who's our CRO, it was also his first time at the event the night before. And he's like, damn, it's good. I don't know if you guys, any of you went to it, but it was good. And, you know, we had Kristen Bell there, and we had Jimmy Chin there, and we had like some great speakers, great content. And again, that's that whole thing. If your team is overall better than the other guy's team, they're like, hey, how'd they put that whole thing on? And they're like, Dave, how'd you do that? And I'm like, I had no idea. You know.
Yeah. It's way better to show up and just be happy than show up and have a
be
line
all
of
grumpy.
people. Yeah. Like, oh, everything's on fire. Can you fix it? Not good. All right. So with the growth and revenue, employee count, all of that, a lot of things to juggle. Where are you going to focus your time and efforts over the next year or two?
Oh, we're just going to keep on the formula. You know, like, you know, we laid out we put the strategy on a whiteboard years ago, and it's the same one. We're just continuing to execute on it. You know, if you think we have this concept of an executive dilemma, which is like a brand, even a Panasonic, you would think they have like hundreds of people in their digital or e-com teams. They don't. I walked into Panasonic, I'm like, how many people do you have on digital? They're like 3. I was like, huh? And I go, oh, we have 15 divisions, and every division has, you know, different brands, but like by the time every brand, they want it to keep their own mojo, and so they have an e-com team that's like 3 to 5. I talked to a couple thousand people one time, and I said, hey, how many people have more than 10? 2 people raised their hand. So if we can go in there and solve a problem for brands and keep our margin really low, despite, you know, like JP Morgan, who I love, I went to lunch with one of the folks there, and he's like, when are you going to get to double-digit profitability? I'm like, never. They're like, well, what about when you're big and you get scale and all that stuff? And I'm like, yeah, when we get scale, we're just going to give back to the brands. And, of course, they get all grumpy, and our investors get grumpy about that. But they don't get grumpy when we 5 times their money, right? Because you just win that whole category. And the brands love it. So as long as the brands continue to love us, and they have this, for whatever reason, they are not staffing their e-com teams like they should, digital teams. Because even, think of what they got to do. They got to drive traffic to the direct-to-consumer site. They got to manage, say, in Amazon. They got to manage China. They got to manage Canada. It's impossible for them to do what's being asked. So, you know, so we'll just continue to optimize and make that the best experience that they're ever going to get at the best price. And it's going to work.
Yeah. I wish we had something here at Silicon Slopes that we could just hire Pattern to do, but we don't.
Thanks.
That'd be really nice. Cool. I think we have a microphone in the back right here.
You can almost withstand any downturn if you can get those two numbers in the right, sitting right. So we're close. If we can get both those numbers, one of them we're profitable already. That's box is checked. We've been profitable since the very beginning, and still are. And then the second box though is cash flow, and we haven't checked that box yet, but we're getting close. And we've been working at it for 14 months or so, rigidly. And then we had a little curveball with, but we have a lot of cash. You guys saw we raised $225 million, a while back. The timing of that actually turned out to be really good, right? Considering the fact that after we did that raise, the whole market went. But so those are the numbers you have to watch, and it's just you have to wake up and be crazy disciplined and crazy good every day, or else you'll miss. And we have a lot of our competitors that are like completely falling apart because of those two things. So it's a good question, and there's not an easy answer, but it's still solvable.
Dave, thanks for sharing everything today. Thinking about the level of success that you've reached, there's a lot of other smart, hardworking founders that haven't achieved anywhere near what you have. What do you think you've done differently than others to reach this level of success?
I don't know. Me and Mel talk about that sometimes. And I think a lot of a couple things maybe is if you're going to do a thing, then you have to go all in. And then you have to not do 4 other things. So we see all the time, like, some lady who's like, I'm going to start a Greek restaurant or whatever. And she's like, she puts all the people and all the effort and the menus and the designs, and she does all this work. And then she launches in the strip mall. And we all watch them do this, and we're like, well, that's probably going to die. And it doesn't cost that much more to just get your location right. Or, so I think you're like, okay, if I'm going to do this thing, second place is just a complete non-option, and I got to go all in. Which means you will have to not do 3 other things, because you can't go all in on all of them. No one ever has enough money. So you pick what you're going to go in on. That I think maybe is one thing. And then me and Mel have a very similar level of risk tolerance. Because I think the only time there's disagreements that come into companies, if they're very data-driven, because you're like, okay, this, and this, and you're like, hey, the risk of this is this, and the reward is potentially this, so should we go for it? And me and Mel line up on that almost all the I might even say all the time. And so that's very helpful. And then I think the other thing is, if you're going to go start something, doing it by yourself, I don't know, it's hard. Because every night you're like, you want to talk to someone about it, and if your spouse is like pissed that you're like work until 11, and like, then maybe you just shouldn't do it. Or you just got to find a partner that you can call. Me and Mel almost quit so many times. I was going to tell Mel, I had decided my whole speech I was going to quit. And I went to tell her, and she was in this warehouse that have you guys ever driven like SR92? On SR92, there's this guy on this, because we couldn't fit in Mel's garage anymore. So she's like, she drives by this guy's house, and he has like 8 garages. I don't know if you've seen this guy's house. We're like, so Mel's like, surely he doesn't need all those. So she just goes and knocks on his door and is like, hey, using all the garages? And he's like, no, why, you want to use them? And so she made a deal with him to rent like 3 of the garages or something. And he said, I'll put some heat in here. And he never did. So I go over one day to this guy's house, random guy's house, go into the garages, and Mel is working with some high schooler, and she has like all these gloves on, and they're like freezing. And I'm working my other job because for the first 2 years she's sort of running it. So I show up and she starts bawling. She's like, "This is so hard." And I was going to tell her I was going to quit, and I didn't. I'm like, never mind. I'm going to work till midnight again tonight on the tech. We'll be fine, right? But so there's like some of those key pivotal moments where you just wear out because you're not making money. You're not sure you see a really good path to it exactly. And so I think maybe another thing is you got to find someone that like, is your person that you can do it with. Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
A few ideas.
Hey, it's been really fun to listen to you speak and just hear how your brain works. And so I'm hearing that your growth as a company is formulaic and predictable and you can prove it. But it's also exciting and probably something you want to have that step change in your business, to have the unexplained growth, the big growth. Do you do anything differently to think, put yourself in a different space, to come up with the ideas, chase the ideas? Or do you view them as too risky,
Well, we're chasing a bunch of ideas. We love to win. Here's one thing, though, is like Pattern will hit 10 billion. I believe Pattern will hit 100 billion. I don't usually like to tell people that, but we will. And in the early days, people were like, I told people would hit 1 billion, and everyone thought I was just totally nuts land crazy. And we did, and we will. And we'll hit 100 billion. Where I'm not willing to give is like, so we're going to hit 10 billion. We just, but what if we could either all work 90 hours a week and hit it in 3 years, or have lives and hit it in 4? I don't care if I hit it in 4, right? And so, at the company, we all have unlimited PTO. And if someone came to me and Mel, like, hey, you guys can no longer do your civ break, and we usually take a Monday and a Friday on the end of that weekend, I just freaking quit. Well, I don't care. It's only $1 billion. I'm playing civ, right? And so I think that's the one thing that might be a little bit different about us is we are gonna win, but not at any cost, right? But now we do have this idea of game time. So me and Mel talk about game time. And because we do this with our employees, and we take our time, they take their time, come to our parking lot at 6 o'clock, it's like largely empty. We're fine with that, right? But no one is touching us in the space. And then people are like, how in the hell are they? But I think you can do both. So we're making some pretty fun, big bets. But we're not trying, it's just not worth it to do it at any cost for any of us. None of us are going to be like 60 years old and we're like, oh, I'm glad I have like an extra $500 million or whatever, right? So we still are going to win. But we have noticed, because we don't crush our employees that way, like we had our warehouse got behind. I'm not sure how this happened. We missed some data and whatnot. And we ended up, like before the Christmas holiday, we had like 1.7 million units sitting in the warehouse, and we had to get them out. I put in a call to the whole company, and 90% of them got on a flight the next day, flew to Kentucky. All of the normal staff who like write code and tech guys and all this, and we labeled product in the warehouse from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single day, Saturday, Sunday included, for like 15 days. And everyone just grinded their asses off, right? And then we go back and, but we don't ask people to do that all the time, except for we call it like it's game time. Like but if it's game time all the time, you have some weird problem going on, right? So it's a fun group, and so we make some big bets, but when we go to make a big bet, we're gonna be hard to beat, because if we're gonna make a big bet, it's a concept, we're going all in, and we're gonna do a little bit of game time, and you can't beat us on game time, because we also take our time to go play Civ at the cabin, right? So it's this weird balance.
How do you handle, competitors who are your clients? So, two coffee brands or two shoe brands. How do you handle, their data? How do you handle making sure that they feel comfortable with hiring you to not utilize their brand to, boost up somebody else?
Yeah, well, we're crazy about that. So of course we build all of the iron curtains between walls, but a lot of it is just the incentive system internally. So all of our brand management team gets very significant bonus. Everyone's bonus is aligned around how their brand performs. And so they almost go crazy about making sure that no one else knows what they're doing, because they've got their strategy and they're not going to talk to the other guy. The incentive system is built that way. But, and there are some technical details that I won't go into as to why, Amazon and many of those companies work on like the second highest bidding system. So actually, if you have multiple competitors in the same space, your actually ad spend starts to go down pretty significantly, like 35% in many cases. So there are some mathematical reasons why it won't matter as much. But no matter how much I tell brands this, they still won't believe me entirely. And it's why we'll have like 4 or 5 big competitors in our space. Because if I sign, Sony, then Samsung is going to want to go somewhere else, naturally, right? So there will be, take it to the bank, there isn't great competitors in our space right now, but there will be. And they will win like we are, for that reason.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. David, I've learned a lot about Civ.
Great game.
Great game, apparently. You can play it for 24 hours. And really enjoy the story of Pattern and how you guys are doing things, and appreciate your time.
Thank you.